Looking at ways of trying to develop new strategies, UK itself is not as escaped yeah, I mean, we part of what we also here called Finlay, we've also got UK seems to be like landed on independent ways. Do you feel that you are sort of getting up every day and resisting that in the way that Katie Dugdale is having to do in Scotland?
Not what it's saying. You feel a lot more on it. 2011 had a referendum where it really set more powers, a much bigger margin back than we were looking at. So it's gotten more autonomy, more devolution, not more independence. Living in independent areas, living in more Russian you might get people with us. In a properly structured UK, that's it.
But if, on the other hand, Scotland were to lead to independence, my government would do the Ireland quite seriously about its border to one of the ways.
I think in Scotland, the whole thing becomes unstable. Some serious work to make it stable as a goal. There's Northern Ireland, it doesn't exist anymore. Black, New Jack doesn't exist anymore. So for us, Scotland is because of the home having us, not just for England, not just for Scotland. For me, the way to avoid that is to have a proper equal partnership of four nations in the UK.
And where would you, looking at the direction for the structures, how would people
We will tell. I mean, my role is that the SNP starts at a much higher level than the future referendum we did before the last referendum. Who knows? The rules turn us around the past year. We've seen results we didn't expect. And we're going to get that.
Will there be any point in having a sort of validated referendum in Wales to prove that well, what's the same in the UK?
Now, for me, what's important is that when there's a final deal on the table, probably not about this country stuff, but each of the four parliaments, as I say, why do I say that? Well, you've got agriculture, it doesn't exist. Agriculture doesn't exist. It's not especially if we're going to have people who tax the areas that we've elected control, we need to have some of that deal, and we'll approve that deal.
Okay, thank you very much. The government takes it, exactly. Well, we've got some breaking news just from the police in London. 6 more people have been charged in connection with the attack on the asylum seeker in Croydon at the weekend. So that's 6 more people charged. That person, of course, obviously charged yesterday. Let's have a look at the weather.
As a warm day ends the referendum, delicious aromas and a steamy evening in nature.
Well, it's been sunny here in Cardiff, but cloudy over a bit now. Meanwhile, the southeastern part of England should have a rather dull start to the afternoon. Scotland will see gusty clouds running through dry, but at least some sun is showing, especially east of high ground. The Midlands and central southern England will brighten later as well, but southeast England will be staying there. So rather cloudy in the evening. There'll be a little more patchy rain there, although it won't melt much. Elsewhere, showers will develop quite widely across western Scotland and the gales in the Cornwall will strengthen, but most other places will be fine. Southern Britain and the South of Ireland will be dry tonight after any evening rain clears the southeast. But northern Britain, Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland will see sunshine outbreaks. These skies will keep most places frost-free and a stiff wind and the north will feel very cold there. Tomorrow, Wednesday, will be fairly cloudy with a little patchy rain in the north and west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, that's it from us on Politics Today on the road in Cardiff. Thank you very much indeed to Wales for hosting us. Tomorrow we're crossing the country to the UK City Culture Hall as we continue our trip around the UK. Then, Scotland and Northern Ireland to come. More coming up on Sky News and the
Introducing new Control GX, the shampoo with a brain. So smart, it reduces grey gradually. The more you shampoo with Control GX, the less grey you have. Just use it until you like what you see. Smart. Gradually reduce grey with Control GX from just the mouth.
Like Morrison's, this tender British beef roasting joint is £5 per kilo. Easter, Morrison's makes it.
If you care about your fellow human beings, please listen to Dana's story.
Entonces está poniendo por la letra, ya sacan de la ya sacan
When Dana's husband was kidnapped, she was forced to flee Syria with her children. She survived a boat crossing, kidnapping, 4 days lost without food or water. Now she has nothing. Dana isn't just another faceless refugee. She's a human being, and a mother, who suffered more terribly than we can imagine. How can we hear her story and do nothing? Today you can do something simple to show Dana you care. Text CARE to 03010 and give £5 to CARE International. Caring for refugees is what CARE does, and they do it in practical ways. Warm clothes, hot meals, soap, little human touches that mean so much when it comes to everything. So please, do that one decent human thing today. Text CARE to 03010 now. You can give her the most important gift of all. Hope.
Measures of the political passport. There's certain votes on them, see if you want to win. They just see right at the top of the tree. Obviously, you look up at the other one, you're like, I'm leaving the masters. You're fulfilling the time and dream. You can't buy them for 2016 Masters Champion. Not going to take it away from you.
The Real Life This Year's Major Stories. The Masters starts Thursday, live on Sky Sports.
A number of children amongst 58 dead in a suspected gas attack in Syria's Idlib province.
Theresa May defends the UK's links with Saudi Arabia ahead of a visit to the country this afternoon.
Dead in St. Petersburg metro bombing rises to 14 as police identify a suspect.
The first image of a Croydon attack victim is released as 6 people are charged in connection with his assault.
And the National Trust reinstates Easter after the PM called the egg hunt row ridiculous. At least 58 people, including a number of children, are believed to have died in a suspected gas attack in Syria's Idlib province.
Photos and videos emerged showing people choking and fainting after the attack.
But last week, the Syrian government said claims it was using chemical weapons were devoid of truth. It's understood the rebel-held Syrian town of Khan Sheikhoun was targeted. Well, I think the Whitehall is here, which I think is a very disturbing image of something.
They're very disturbing. We've had to go through them and we've had to choose judiciously the ones that we're happy to show, but they're still quite distressing. There are much more distressing images that are coming out of this terrible attack in Khan Sheikhoun, which is in the area where a lot of people who fled or were expelled from Aleppo went and sought refuge, and where the Syrians and their Russian allies have been bombarding over recent months. Now, this does seem to have been a chlorine gas attack, according to most observers on the scene. And if you look at some of the photographs coming out from Khan Sheikhoun in the aftermath of this attack, they show a number of adult civilians and a number of children civilians being treated. And the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which throughout this conflict has been cataloguing the casualties, thinks that 58 people have died so far, 11 of them children. What chlorine gas does is when it's inhaled, when it's dropped from the air, it obviously diffuses into the atmosphere and then it's inhaled by what's there. In this case, it seems to be children. And what it does is it combines with the water in your lungs to form hydrochloric acid. So it's a very painful how the victims of this chlorine gas attack, if that's what it is, in an attempt to revive this child was being treated. And we've got some other footage, other moving footage of another child being treated. And this is the ward of the hospital where some of these victims of the chlorine gas attack were taken, and where doctors are trying to revive. Other pictures, which we can't show you, are the bodies of children and other children lying in the dirt, being sprayed with water by white helmets, emergency workers trying to revive them as well. So a horrendous scene there.
But as we look at these images, Dominic, we have to remind ourselves the Syrian government says the use of chemical weapons, that's devoid of truth. It is not happening.
Right. And that's in the wake of the red line. Remember, it was laid down by Barack Obama, and he said if the use of chemical weapons continues, he would take some kind of action. It was used, he didn't follow up his red line, but the Syrian government instead, on kind of compromise, agreed to disarm itself of its chemical weapons arsenal. But it's retained chlorine gas, and the UN reckons that between 2014 and 15 alone, it used chlorine gas 3 times. There's a lot of evidence, documented evidence, that it's continued using chlorine gas as a weapon of war, whatever the regime maintains.
Thank you.
Now, Theresa May has favoured the UK's link with Saudi Arabia to hold a visit to the country as part of a trade mission to the Middle East.
The Prime Minister told Sky News she had no difficulty raising allegations of human rights violations from the government there, but she did want to maintain a good trading relationship post-Brexit. This one, I just like, why is this?
We have no difficulty in raising hard issues with those that we meet with, like the in Saudi Arabia or elsewhere around the world. What matters is that we have the relationship engagement that enables us to do that. But we will also be talking about a very important relationship the UK has with Saudi Arabia, an important relationship, yes, in terms of trade, but also in terms of security. Our cooperation with Saudi's cooperation with us has helped to save lives in the UK.
Is that pattern developing in your foreign trips? People are relating it to Brexit. Are we downplaying human rights concerns? Your visits to Saudi Arabia, to Turkey? Where's the strong British tradition of standing up for human rights?
The strong British tradition of standing up for human rights is there. The strong British tradition of standing up for British national interest is there. I want to see the United Kingdom as a truly global Britain, outward-looking, around the world, trading around the world. Yes, a good, continuing, deep partnership with the European Union, but also trading and working with others around the whole of the globe. That's what we will be doing in the future. That's what I'm working on. Yes, it's about trade. That's about jobs back home in the United Kingdom. But it's also about our security. Security for the UK and us working with others to maintain security around the world.
Let's speak to our political correspondent, Dan McCaffrey, who's in Westminster. And down hearing Theresa May speaking to Pfizer there, she's definitely going to speak to Saudi over trade and investment. Also happy to speak to them about human rights allegations for a very difficult balancing act ahead of her.
Yeah, indeed, and that is always the way with relations with Saudi Arabia in many ways. Of course, this is a country with not a great human rights record, but is involved in a controversial war in Yemen, and Theresa May, particularly as a female politician, would be willing to speak out about that. But it does have to be balanced with the fact that Britain wants to continue and build upon its trading relationship with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is at the centre, the anchor somewhat of the Gulf Cooperation Council, and it is clear that it is both kind of Brexit world, in which everything is being sort of risen to Brexit and increasing trade, but Britain may see an opportunity here to try and strike an independent trade deal with that Gulf Cooperation Council. At the moment, I think our trade with Saudi Arabia is equivalent to about 30 billion pounds a year. Now, that's nowhere near obviously what we trade with the European Union, but there is the possibility of filling in the gap somewhat for trade that we might well lose with the EU when we leave the single market. Aside from that contentious issue of Saudi Arabia, Theresa May was also asked by Pfizer in an interview about this report today from the Brexit committee in Parliament, which essentially said that they did not think that no deal was better than a bad deal. They said that no deal, what that consequence of that might well be, had not really been substantiated by the UK government. Theresa May says that the government was preparing for all scenarios, and that ultimately she thought that Britain would get the best possible deal, and that failing to get a deal would not be in the interests of either side. Now, controversial report, but clearly it is putting pressure that is a possibility, you're going to have to at least work out, even if climate one way. Just one other thing that's been popping up today in a series of topics that Prime Minister was forced to mastermind on this issue of Easter and Cadbury's and the National Trust. You may be aware that Cadbury's have stopped using the word Easter into the letters. Well, treating it as that is absolutely ridiculous. As saying Easter is just Christian tradition.
Okay, now we'll talk a little bit about that in just a few moments, actually. And Darren, thanks so much.
14 people are now thought to have died in yesterday's St. Petersburg metro bombing. Intelligence agencies have identified a suspect who, Kazakhstan officials say, is in his early 20s and was born in the city of Osh.
Well, the explosion happened at 2:20 yesterday afternoon between two underground stations on the train leaving the Technological Institute station and heading towards Zanaya Ploshad.
Well, Russia's anti-terror agency says another bomb was made safe at nearby Ploshad Nositania station. Our Russian correspondent John Sparks reports from St. Petersburg.
Russian officials were quick to call this deadly explosion on an underground train in St. Petersburg a terrorist act, and the hunt is now on for those responsible. Multiple sources here saying a suspect from Central Asia was involved, a man who may have blown himself up in a suicide strike.
And the team was Russia. They were carrying out victims. One person has 7 limbs. It was all very difficult.
It was horrible. When I came outside, there was blood everywhere. I saw one woman who had blood all over her face and on her nose.
The authorities shut down the metro network in St. Petersburg. Later, they found a larger explosive device disguised as a fire extinguisher in another metro station. Only one bomb was detonated here in St. Petersburg, but security sources are saying that both devices were strikingly similar in the way they were constructed, in the way they were put together. And that suggests that considerable time, effort, and organization was spent carrying out this attack. Terrorist attacks on Russian soil have been relatively rare of late. 4 years ago, 2 suicide bombers killed 34 people in attacks in the Russian city of Volgograd. In 2011, more than 30 died in an attack at a Moscow airport. As the police and security services begin to investigate this latest incident, the people of St. Petersburg start to count the cost. People like President Putin. The attack, a reminder to him and others that Russia is vulnerable too.
I just want to read some great news about our top story in that apparent chlorine gas attack in Idlib in Syria. There's very disturbing pictures that we've had through. AFP is reporting this morning that bombs have now hit the hospital treating the victims of this, what we think is a chlorine gas attack in Syria. So, not all of these images were taken treating those who survived, and many of whom are children. Now, apparently, it's being defined. We'll get more information on that.
That's news here. The National Trust and Cadbury's have been accused of airbrushing fake from an Easter egg hunt. An annual event previously billed as the Easter egg trail was rebranded on the National Trust website as the Cadbury egg hunt.
The Archbishop of York has condemned the change, saying it's tantamount to spitting on the grave of Cadbury, while the Prime Minister branded it absolutely ridiculous. And the Grave is reporting all of this morning. And are we going to see some change? Are we seeing change here?
Yes, believe it or not, off the back of the Prime Minister's comments, they have changed their website, which we can take a look at in a moment. So the National Trust this morning, they have been calling it Join the Cadbury Egg Hunt. And off the back of the Prime Minister's comments in the past hour or so, I'm told that the website now says Join the Cadbury Egg Hunt this Easter. So they've inserted 2 words, this Easter, in the time it's taken our correspondent in the Middle East to speak to the Prime Minister. So there we go. That has changed. But nevertheless, quite a row has developed. Dr. John Senton, who's the Archbishop of York, he's very angry, and he rightly points out that the founder of Cadbury, John Cadbury, in 1824, founded the business. He was a Quaker, he was a devout Christian, and he's a man whose faith is very, very important to him. And he's just making the point that, he really would be see that this company is removing the word Easter. We do have a statement from the National Trust. They say it's nonsense to suggest the National Trust is downplaying the significance of Easter. Nothing can be further from the truth. A casual glance at our website will see dozens of references to Easter throughout. As part of its wider marketing activity of Easter, Cadbury's will always lead on the branding and wording for its campaigns. Worth noting what Theresa May has said to our reporter. She said, I'm not just the vicar's daughter, I'm a member of the National Trust as well. I think the stance they're taking is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what they are thinking about, frankly. That's from the Prime Minister. So, allow over Easter eggs reaching down.
Yeah, well, at least he has something being done about it too. Edward, thank you.
Okay, let's give you some breaking news and updates on the bomb attack at St. Petersburg metro station yesterday. The number of people died has increased to 14 people. We've also got details now of the person behind the suspected person behind this bomb attack. Russian investigators say that they have now found the metro bomb suspect's body parts that are among the people who were killed in yesterday's attack. 14 people died, and it's thought 49 people were also injured. It happened at St. Petersburg train station. It's thought the person behind the attack is a native Polish guard who obtained Russian citizenship, and it's now believed, according to Russian investigators, again this from Reuters, that the body parts of the person suspected to be behind this attack have now been found.
Yeah, and news are challenging Theresa May to provide evidence that no deal is better than a bad deal on Brexit. The excess of the EU committee is calling on the government to assess the impact on leaving without an agreement at the trade relations.
Well, some members of the committee have refused to back the report, saying it's too pessimistic.
Well, let's talk to the Conservative MP, Dominic Raab, who's a member of that committee, and he was a lead supporter during the referendum campaign. Morning to you. Are you satisfied with what has come out of this committee?
No, the committee split 10-6, so I'd be lying if I said I was satisfied. Equally, I would blow it out of all proportion. It's a 21-person committee, very difficult subject area, contentious, passions on both sides. We've got an excellent chair in Hilary Benn. For me, the report was rushed, skewed, and too pessimistic. It focused all on the risks, scant mention of the opportunities, and actually there's a broader, I think, truth about select committees. I've sat in 3 now, which is that when they carry the whole committee with them, they can be very powerful, set the agenda. We've had 2 reports previously passed with almost consensus, which has set the agenda on final vote, white paper, new nationals, and I'm sure the people on our side, and there is still people on our side, will get back to winning ways.
It raises a lot of questions, doesn't it, on the basis of the committee itself. It's obviously very important, but what you come up with is going to, an awful lot of attention is going to be paid to it. If you can't be more unified, does the committee itself need to be looked at?
Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of the past practice of committees. Committees, select committees, are cross-party, and that's difficult to achieve consensus. It makes it difficult to achieve. So we've got a very skillful chairman with our professional and personal skills. But look, on a contentious issue, with 21 people on it, with different views, different frustrations, I think it's always going to be an inherent challenge to make sure you can get consensus, and people have got different views, and we're all entitled to express those. Equally, we've had 2 reports I mentioned, which have passed with very strong support. And so the choice for any select committee is, do we veer down one particular path and put at risk of consensus? This is what I feel happened with this report, which was only passed 10-6. Or do we try and carry people with us, and there's a way to do that, in which case you have more influence and more credibility. But this is not an easy business, and I'm not criticising the chairman. And actually, there was good humour and professionalism, I think, on all sides, and we will, I hope, as I say, get back to winning ways.
There is a lot of sense, though. A lot of people would say, in trying to work out what no deal means, that is one of the options worth considering.
Oh, it's going to be very important that we can't be all focused on the risk side. And the truth is, I feel, if you look at the report that we put out, most of it was a copy and paste from the Foreign Affairs Committee report. We're not here to just be an echo chamber of the findings from another committee. But look, it's a perfectly reasonable question, and it could have been calibrated and done differently, but of course I would say that I represent one side of the debate, albeit very mindful of the concerns
straightforward than this. But the truth is, we put out, as I said, 2 reports which have been very strong, precisely because we've been more or less united in our approach. And the way select committees are most effective is when actually they carry that bipartisan support. And I'm confident we can get back to that based on our own experience.
I mean, Mr. Rabbit, you are seasoned in diplomacy, and that'd be very apparent to anyone watching who knows what happened last week. I mean, for all your praise of Hillary Down as chairman, I mean, you were one of a number of members who walked out last week.
It's interesting you say that those that know what happened last week, most of them don't really know what happened, but that's fine. You're reporting what's apparent. The truth is, there was no great dramatic walkout, but if the report was going to be put out subject to drafting amendments and drafting committee, in the form that it appeared to all members of the committee, it's very clear to most lead MPs, and some are not there because it was put out in such a rushed format that people's diaries hadn't been coordinated. And so I'm afraid if that approach is taken, it inevitably splits support. But what I'm hopefully trying to convey to you is that we all understand that there are lots of passionate, deeply held views on all sides, and indeed different views as to quite how the scrutiny and the way the committee should be run. But actually, with professionalism, goodwill, and a very sensible and solid and strong chair, actually we can get past this and get back to the way we worked on the first 2 reports, which was towards a far stronger consensus and as a result, far more influential reports.
Dr. Grant, thank you.
Questions I need coming up in this point. We'll hear from Arsene Wenger. Is future become any clearer? Plus, wet weather gear at the ready at the Masters in Augusta.
That's nothing! I contributed the BMW 5 Series for only £49 from 6. I think I would say.
Six, drive smart.
Are you trying to lose weight? Then let me tell you about Jane Plan. Jane Plan is a calorie-controlled diet that's delivered straight to your door. There's a choice of over 70 dishes, tasty, nutritious meals that can be prepared in minutes. Jane Plan can help you lose weight and feel great.
Since I've done Jane Plan, I genuinely feel that I've got my mojo back.
And if you order at janeplan.com, you'll save £100. Go direct to janeplan.com or call 0800 377 7078 now. Jane Plan, the diet that delivers.
The brutal conflict in South Sudan has forced millions of people from their homes. Many have survived horrific violence, and now their lives are at risk again because there's not enough food to go around. So hundreds of thousands of people, many of them children, have been through so much already, face sickness, starvation, and death. There's a real threat of famine, so we must act now. Oxfam urgently needs your help today. Right now, Oxfam is working around the clock to distribute emergency food to hundreds of thousands of people. The task is enormous. Your help is urgently needed to reach people who are on the brink of starvation. £3 is all it costs to provide a family with the food they so desperately need. So please text food to 70061 and give £3 to help now. Please don't wait. Your text could save lives. Thank you.
Russian investigators have said they believe a suicide bomber was behind an attack which killed 14 people on St. Petersburg Metro yesterday afternoon. A further 49 people injured in that explosion between 2 underground stations. Russia's anti-terror agency says an additional unexploded device at another metro station was made safe.
We're now on Central London by Dr. Andrew Coxwell, who's the director of the Russia Study Centre at the Henry Jackson Society. And thanks so much for joining us this morning. Now, we are getting more details coming in exactly who was potentially behind this attack. And there are questions over whether it was a suicide bomb. It looks like the Russian authorities saying they found the body of the suspected person behind this. So is it more likely to be a suicide attack?
It's
city of Volgograd. Now, suicide bombing is a tactic that Russia has much experience of. It's these sort of attacks in the past, and certainly with regard to yesterday's attack, suspicion quickly fell on the sorts of individuals and groups that have previously hit and targeted transportation infrastructure, which is to say buses, metro systems, airports and planes themselves. And these individuals are likely to be, or certainly in the past, have been individuals radicalized by the insurgency that emerged from the two brutal wars that Russia fought in Chechnya in the 1990s and 2000s. And those individuals, as I said, these suicide bombers before as a tactic and a technique in Moscow, most notably. I suppose the attack that they are most famous for, or the attack that they are most infamous for, is was the school hostage siege in Beslan in North Ossetia, Alania, in September 2004, when over 300 people were killed, and of which about 186 were children. So these are tactics that Russia has seen before, and tactics that Russia regrettably has experienced before.
Now, Russian investigators, they're giving out very few details about what it is that they do know. It's all coming through very slowly. In addition to no group actually claiming responsibility, but what we do know from Kyrgyzstan officials, their percentages of those coming from Kyrgyzstan, a Russian citizen, and they've even given the name Akbajon Janilov. And what does that tell you about who could be behind this?
Well, Kyrgyzstan is a country of about 6 million people in Central Asia. It has reasonably good political and economic ties with Moscow. There's a Russian military base in Kyrgyzstan. It is one of Russia's regional allies. That being said, a legacy of the Soviet period is that there are border checks in place between Kyrgyzstan and Russia. Equally, there are border checks in place between the other four Central Asian states and Russia. And a key concern of the FSB, Russia's security services, over recent years has been the flow of individuals from Central Asia into Russia. Now, with Russia's domestic insurgency in the North Caucasus, there have been targeted individuals who have been from Central Asia, who've been key idealists, but also, let's say, foot soldiers who've carried out attacks in Russia and elsewhere. Russia's domestic insurgency has gone reasonably quiet, or went reasonably quiet over the last, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years, and that's been part of the Kremlin's own tactics and strategy, which was to launch a crackdown in the run-up to the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, which we've since learned basically involved in deals wherein Russia allowed or facilitated insurgents to travel to the Middle East, Syria and Iraq in particular, on a promise that they would not return to Russia. Now, that was not only insurgents from the North Caucasus, it was also insurgents from Central Asia. Now, what that has led to, rather unsurprisingly, is a reasonably large Russian-speaking, not just Russian citizenry, but Russian-speaking population within the ranks of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Estimates suggest that something between 4,000 and 5,000 Russians or Russian speakers are within the Islamic State ranks, which one might suggest that yesterday's attack has something to do with that.
Well, Dr. Hendrik Oxford from the Washington Studies says the hacking and justice advice of business officer. Thank you.
Let's have a look at the score.
The workout is it? I'll just touch my toes.
Good morning. Arsene Wenger says we'll know soon if he plans to remain Arsenal manager. For now, he's concentrating on making sure Arsenal finish in the Premier League's top four. They're currently sixth going into tomorrow's game against West Ham.
I think it has shown one thing in 20 minutes is that I've got care about Arsenal, about the next game, and I will continue to do that as long as I'm here.
How much of a problem, from moving on to do your job has the uncertainty surrounding your future caused you?
Nothing, honestly. I'm professional, and I think when you're professional, can be performed in ideal conditions and in non-ideal conditions as well. That's what it is to be professional.
Rugby and ex-Barnsley head coach Mike Ford has left Geelong after 6 months in charge. He'll be replaced by former Leicester director of rugby and Geelong's current Forwards coach Richard Cockrell. Ford leads the 2 times European champions after being knocked out of the Champions Cup at Clonard on Saturday. Now we're exactly 1 year away from the start of the 2018 Commonwealth Games in Australia. Team England has announced that table tennis players Paul Drinkle and Ian Fitchford are the first athletes to qualify in the will be sending their biggest ever squad to the games, and hopes of success are high.
We will have to make sure they are the best prepared team, an exciting team. There will be 600 leading shores, 400 plus athletes, 18 sports, both para-athletes and everybody athletes who will come together on the Gold Coast.
The weather forecast today at Augusta is better as the world's top golfers prepare for the Masters. But their practice was interrupted by a storm in the morning, and in the afternoon, the course was evacuated because of a tornado warning. So will the rain affect the tournament? We can find out on Sky Sports. It's the only place to see all 4 days of the Masters live. There's more live now on Sky Sports News HQ, and we're back in an hour.
Now he's watering. It won't go into a fuss, you know. Not this square.
This is coming up as Theresa May prepares to head to Saudi Arabia. We'll look at the human rights issues surrounding the Prime Minister's visit.
Have you ever had your morning spoiled by an unexpectedly large gas and electricity bill? You think you found a great deal, then boom, it happens again. But wait, Optimus Energy could be your super weapon to stop the giant energy bills for good. Optimus Energy believes in fair value forever. See if you can zap your giant bill at www.optimus.energy now.
The Dunelm sale is now on, with 20% off thousands of homeware and furniture products. Shop in store over at dunelm.com.
Join the TV advertising revolution. Search Goroscope.
With the Tuxnote app, you can send your favourite photos as real postcards direct from your mobile.
Hey Mum, Sophie's first picture of you. How very flattering. Love Emma.
Choose your photo, write your own message, and touch send. We'll even print and post the very next day. Go on, surprise someone you love. Download the app now or visit tuxnote.com.
Oh, shit, what do we make it? Just getting out of bed in the morning. It's like a tentative Nazi.
Three, two, one.
Go back to the start. For the first time ever. All 7 movies in one place. Sky Cinema Fast and Furious, available from the 8th of April.
Nothing of a kid.
What
watching Sky News, the headlines this morning. At least 58 people, including a number of children, are believed to have died in a suspected gas attack in Syria's Idlib province.
The man suspected of killing 14 people by bombing a St. Petersburg train has been identified by intelligence agencies as Akbazon Jalilov, a native of Kyrgyzstan.
As we say, told Sky News that she will have no difficulty in raising allegations of human rights violations with her visit in Saudi Arabia later. But the Prime Minister said she also wants to maintain a good trading relationship post-Brexit.
Well, staying with those comments from the Prime Minister, let's just remind you of what she said to our political editor, Faisal Issa.
We have no difficulty in raising hard issues with those that we meet with here in Saudi Arabia or elsewhere around the world. What matters is that we have the relationship of engagement that enables us to do that. But we will also be talking about the very important relationship the UK has with Saudi Arabia, an important relationship, yes, in terms of trade, but also in terms of security. Our cooperation with Saudi's cooperation with us has helped to save lives in the UK.
Is that pattern developing in your foreign trips? People are relating it to Brexit. Are we downplaying human rights concerns for visits to Saudi Arabia, to Turkey? Where's the strong British tradition of standing up for human rights?
The strong British tradition of standing up for human rights is there. The strong British tradition of standing up for British national interest is there. I want to see the United Kingdom as a truly global Britain. Outward looking, around the world, trading around the world. Yes, a good, continuing, deep partnership with the European Union, but also trading and working with others around the whole of the globe. That's what we will be doing in the future. That's what I'm working on. Yes, it's about trade. That's about jobs back home in the United Kingdom. But it's also about our security. Security for the UK and us working with others to maintain security around the world.
Joining us to discuss this very issue is Sir William Paisley, the former British ambassador to Saudi Arabia. And we can also speak to Maya Farah, the director of human rights organisation Reprieve. And thank you both so much for joining us this morning. Maya, let's start with yourself. I'm not sure if you're able to hear that interview with Theresa May and our political editor, Faisal Islam. What she's pointing out, and what everybody's pointing out, is the importance of securing a trade deal. Now, Brexit is happening. We are going to lose jobs and we are going to lose trade. And what's important for Theresa May is to secure better trade, better investment, and to have a great history with that. When you look at Saudi Arabia, nearly £7 billion in trade and services exported in 2015. Isn't this something the Prime Minister should be focusing more on?
Well, I wouldn't say she should be focusing more on it. It's entirely appropriate that she has a relationship with Saudi Arabia and with other partners. However, what is of critical importance, both for her dealings with Saudi Arabia and indeed for us here at home in Britain, is that she does not renege on Britain's commitment to human rights. We are dealing with a country that has sentenced to crucifixion men as young boys who were as young as 15 when arrested, tortured into signing these bogus confessions. And on that charge that they were arrested for was attending protests. One of them, Ali Al-Nina, was charged and sentenced to crucifixion for, on his charge sheet, was listed inviting people to the protest on his BlackBerry, administering first aid at the protest, attending the protest. These are not things which a British Prime Minister should stand behind. And what she should be calling for is the immediate commutation and release of the juveniles who were sentenced to death for attending protests, sentenced to beheading, crucifixion, when they were as young as 15 years old. We've already seen executions of some of those juveniles arrested in those uprisings. So it is not acceptable for us, the British public, to see our Prime Minister go over to Saudi Arabia and talk about trade without saying that we cannot support the executions of young men who have done nothing more than attend protests and will be tortured and sentenced to crucifixion.
And William Paisley and Maya does make a good point. This is something that the Prime Minister cannot ignore, surely.
And I'm sure she would. I've been involved in a number of Prime Ministerial visits to Saudi Arabia and ministerial visits, and these issues are raised that some people are calling for her not to go to Saudi Arabia because they have bad human rights record. Well, I think that's not the way to proceed. We're much more likely to have influence if we engage as a candid friend, talk to them in private. And I know that we have, the Saudis are absolutely clear about our opposition sure the Prime Minister will raise human rights in the context of a broader strategic relationship, but she's not going to make that relationship dependent on Saudi Arabia's human rights record.
My phone, so you're going to say something there.
Well, I think it's quite concerning that we have had, well, the Cameron also raised these cases, but the 3 young men who, again, sentenced to being beheaded and crucified for attending protests or administering first aid at protests. One of them pulled out of school, age 17, only to be tortured by the police and sentenced to death. They are still on death row and they face imminent execution, potentially. I think it's really important when we look at, and we're not saying don't engage, that has never been our position. It's really important when you look at this engagement, to look at the gains that have been made. The young men are still on death row, and so to look at what it means to cooperate and not condemn the use of intelligence that has been gleaned through torture. We know that intelligence gained through torture is not good intelligence, indeed it should not be admissible. So all of these individuals whose cases we've raised, who are still languishing on death row, some of the juveniles having been executed already, they were sentenced to death, to crucifixion, some of them, on the basis of really, really flawed intelligence, just a torture confession. Now, is that the kind of relationship we have? Is that the kind of security cooperation we want? I don't think so. I don't think that advances our aims in terms of ensuring a more secure Britain. Indeed, democracy in certain countries, including in the Gulf countries and in the Middle East, is of course critical to our own security. Democracy goes hand in hand with human rights. We cannot say that we will prioritise trade, prioritise other issues over human rights. So I think we need to hear more than just, well, we need candid discussions, as Robert mentioned, but these need to be strong discussions and they need to have tangible outputs, and those outputs need to be commutations of death sentences and an end to the sentencing to death of juvenile protesters, the sentencing to death of people for non-lethal offences, and the use of torture confessions.
Molly making some very good points here for William. We are seeing those cases that she's mentioned there, but on top of that, also the situation with Yemen, Iran, Saudi Arabia using weapons provided by the British government. The British government is supposed to be have an ethical foreign policy. This should be possible authority and going to Saudi Arabia today.
I'm sure it will be. I mean, it's very important because Britain would not be able to supply arms to Saudi Arabia if we thought that these arms would be used in breach of international humanitarian law. And it's very important that we engage with the Saudis on that, on this issue, on how those weapons are used in Yemen. And I know the Foreign Office, when considering licenses for Saudi Arabia, have to take into account the risks or the likelihood that they will be used in breach of international humanitarian law. We're all governed by the same rules.
Well, Molly, take a look at the security relationship we have, which is something also that Theresa May is going to speak to the Saudi government and hear about. The security links we have with them have helped Saudi Arabia and also have helped Britain. Theresa May saying British lives have been saved thanks to intelligence from the Saudis.
Well, so what's really important here, and I'm glad you mentioned it, is that, I've already talked about intelligence based on torture confessions is bad intelligence. So we know that torture is not
in 2010, British government were able to foil a bomb attack that's after Saudi informant informed MI6 that an Al-Qaeda officer working in Yemen has actually planted a bomb on a plane. That's key security information, and it was found on the plane, and it was able to stop a terror attack. That's important.
Absolutely, that's important. But as I said previously, human rights goes hand in hand with democracy. We can have engagement, but we need to enforce. We need not to renege on our commitment to fundamental human rights, and that includes not sentencing to death on the execution of those torture confessions. To go back to the security assistance point, we do have some safeguards in place, but what Reprieve has found and been deeply troubled by in relation to the British government's assistance to Saudi Arabia, and I'm speaking specifically, for example, of the College of Police's heavy investment, multi-million-pound investment, UK taxpayer investment in Saudi Arabian policing, and they have trained them on forensics and cybercrime. All of this could be good, but the assessments are not being done to ensure that we are compliant with human rights, that we are operating abroad as we wish to operate here at home. So what we've seen is that some of the intelligence gathered by using these techniques, so some of the juveniles who were sentenced to death for using their black books. That was on the basis of evidence gathered with the help of the kind of training that the College of Police provided. When we, the group, asked for evidence of the assessments that were done, there were none provided, save for one that was done by the Saudi police force, who had done the cooperated with the written received the funding for the training in the first place. So that's essentially, student marking his own homework. So that is not
I really do apologise. I'll have to leave it there. Let's just see exactly from Teresa May Holcomb to any performances dealing with human rights and the skills and trade issues. Michael, I really good talking to you and some of your posts. Thanks so much. Thank you.
I just want to read the latest on the attack in Russia yesterday. Just had an image released of the suspect here. Akbazon Jalilov, a native of Kyrgyzstan. Now, authorities say they believe he was a suicide bomber. They believe that they have found the remnants of him amongst the wreckage. 14 people died in that bombing on that St. Petersburg train. And so this man, Akbazon Jalilov, has now been identified as the man behind the attack. And this image just released in the last few moments.
Okay, let's take you to Europe now and over India. The Chancellor has said that the UK and India will build upon their common heritage to work on trade deal following the decision to leave the European Union.
Philip Hammond is in Delhi on the first day of the trip, which will include talks with the Finance Minister of the establishing a new economic and trading partnership between the two countries.
This is a mature relationship between equals, the largest democracy in the world and the oldest democracy in the world. Coming back together to look at building a new relationship as India's economy opens up, as the UK averts its gaze from Europe more towards the wider world, and both of us seeing opportunities that of course are based on some of our common heritage. We share a legal system, we share a language of business, which gives us huge advantages in trying to build trade and investment links between our countries. These are things that we can and we will build upon.
Let's talk about economics. There's Ed Conway, who's in Delhi following all of this. But it sounds on the surface very positive. Presumably, it's not going to be quite as easy to get these things up and running and implemented.
Yeah, I mean, these kind of things take a long time, and particularly historically, when India has done trade negotiations, they've gone on for a very long time. Particularly, their talks with the EU, they've had a number of negotiations with the EU that have been going on over the course of the last few years. And so some people are a little bit sceptical as to whether this can be sealed quite as quickly as many people within the government feel. And in fact, that to some extent was what I asked Chancellor about a little bit earlier on in that press conference. I was asking him about those historical ties, but also about whether there's been complacency about how easily a deal can be done. Certainly, there have been no talks until the UK has actually left the EU. So, these discussions at the moment, the Chancellor making a visit to India, to some extent, it's just the same as it would have been before that vote happened last year, except this time, of course, there is that overhanging question. What is Britain's relationship going to be like with the rest of the world? And Philip is very keen to emphasise that here in India, where you have 1.25 billion people, that's that kind of a population, that kind of a market will be very important for the UK in the future. But at the moment, we're at such an early stage that for the time being, it is rather more like shadow dancing than actually negotiating right now. Okay, so thank you.
Migrants flee to Canada to escape Donald Trump's policies.
On March 29, Britain triggered Article 50. There is no going back. How will we navigate These are uncharted waters. Brexit. Continuing coverage on Sky News.
To add Sky Sports, go to sky.com/sports.
When you look into Jake's eyes, you feel his pain. When you look into his eyes, you feel her fear. When they're sad eyes begging to help them, you'll know why we have to be there for them. Every year, over 8,000 animals urgently need the shelter for Patterson dogs and cats. Over 8,000 cries for help, for shelter, safety and warmth. Please call 0800 464 0942 or text SAFE to 60002 and give £2 a month. You can make sure we're always there to stop the pain, give them shelter and help them recover. This is what your kindness does for animals who have no one else. It means a safe and happy life. But there are many more who need your help right now. So please call 0800 464 0942 or text SEC to 60002 and give £2 a month. Please don't look away. You can change his life forever.
Have you ever had your morning spoiled by an unexpectedly large gas and electricity bill? You think you found a great deal, then boom, it happens again. But wait, Optimus Energy can be your secret weapon to zap those giant energy bills for good. Optimus Energy believe in fair value forever. See if you can zap your giant bill at www.optimus.energy. Yeah.
A growing number of migrants in the United States have been crossing the border to claim asylum in Canada since President Trump took office. The Canadian Border Agency says there have been 6 times more people since this time last year.
Well, Donald Trump was elected on policy to crack down on the number of refugees expected in America. The US correspondent has Peter reports.
These people are being dropped off at the end of a lonely country road in upstate New York. They come here to flee America.
Don't give it a fire. I can't come back. I have no plan.
I don't okay, so we just
It's I kept it on 2 roads over there. I don't have nothing to go to.
Afraid, unsure, they're waiting to hear these words.
We're going to have to arrest you for using the office and tell you to transfer to the immigration officer. That's what's going to happen.
Decision made, picking their way past abandoned luggage as a baby's cry. It's a few short steps to Canada and a chance to become a refugee there. The next morning, it happens again. Are you guys trying to cross the border?
We're illegally crossing into Canada. We will be arrested. Do you understand me? Okay.
This time, it's 3 men from Turkey are you leaving, sir?
I live in
Look on you. They show us letters explaining why they want to leave.
the same. Yes.
You're a teacher?
Yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm still a teacher.
Says here, Canada helps refugees and gives them opportunity to live as human beings without any fear. Why not stay in America? Because Donald Trump. Minutes after the men cross, US Border Patrol arrives. There have been reports of undocumented people being caught and deported to home countries before they have a chance to get over the line. But that was the intention. This time, the opposite too late.
Do you have any weapons on you?
For many, being detained by the Canadian police is actually the aim. An agreement between the US and Canada prevents people from either country seeking refugee status in the other. But that law doesn't apply at unofficial points of entry. And since Donald Trump rose to power on a wave of populist anti-immigrant sentiment, thousands have crossed this way.
Definitely seeing those families crossing the border. It touched somewhere our hearts. Most of us are father and mothers, so the push is going to be stopped.
After a background check, most people are released and given access to housing, schools, emergency health care, and work permits while they await immigration hearings. The US and Canada may be neighbours, but right now they're separated by much more than this vast border running through the wilderness. And Thomas Peter, Sky News at the US-Canadian border.
Harrison Ford will keep his pilot's license and won't face a fine after he flew his private plane over an American airline jet and mistakenly landed on a taxiway in California. The Federal Aviation Administration exposed the investigation into the active near miss in February, praising his cooperation and saying he's agreed to undergo airman counselling.
Now, scientists in Manchester have discovered a way to sieve seawater to turn it into drinking water. Using a membrane made of graphene, researchers were able to remove salts from the water and make it safe to drink. The technology offers the potential for millions of people in the developing world to get drinking water.
Let's have a look at the weather for you.
Australia welcomes a bright day as clouds drift through European skies.
Now, the southeastern half of England will have a bit of a dull and damp start this afternoon. Northern Scotland seeing some blustery showers running in on the strong winds there. Most other places will be dry with at least some sunny spells, especially the eastern high ground. The Midlands, central southern England will brighten later on as well, but southeast England and East Anglia staying over the cloudy. It will be some patchy rain there, so I'm not amount to a great deal. Elsewhere, showers will develop pretty widely across western Scotland. Gales in the far north will strengthen, I'm afraid, but most other places will be fine. Southern Britain and the South of Ireland will be dry tonight after any rain clears the southeast in the evening, but northern Britain, Northern Ireland, North of Ireland, seeing some showery outbreaks. Cloudy skies keeping in most places frost-free, particularly in the north will then be very cold there. For tomorrow, fairly cloudy day. A little bit of patchy rain for you in the north and in the west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Lots of fun news coming up at news today. A suspected chemical attack hit a rebel-held town in Syria.
To my brother Cyril, I leave my trust to your care. To my wife and children, I leave the house. To people who are vulnerable and alone, I leave compassion, reassurance, and hope. To those living in the shadow of war and natural disasters, I leave emergency medical supplies, temporary accommodation, and a network of trained volunteers. Because in my role, I really give to the British Red Cross to help people in crisis, whether they are in the very bold with a commitment that they will not do more.
When you write or update your will, please remember the work of the British Red Cross. If you leave us just 1% of your estate, you can make a real difference for generations to come. The British Red Cross, refusing to ignore people in crisis.
Your glasses direct to your door. Go to Glasses Direct and before you buy, try them on at home for free. And right now, get 2 pairs for £19 with lenses. You should go direct to glassesdirect.co.uk.
Have you ever had your morning spoiled by an unexpectedly large gas and electricity bill? You think you found a great deal, then boom, it happens again. But wait, Optimus Energy could be your secret weapon to stop those giant energy bills for good. Optimus Energy for even better value forever. See if you can zap your giant bill at www.optimus.energy now.
Wages of the critical magical. They sit in large time and see who you want to win. They just see right at the top of the tree. Obviously, you look at the end and you're like, I'm living the masses. You're fulfilling your child and dream. You can't buy them feeling. So basically, that's the structure. Not going to take away from it.
We will write this year's major stories. The Masters starts Thursday, live on Sky Sports.
Several children amongst 58 dead in a suspected gas attack in Syria's Idlib province.
Theresa May defends the UK's links with Saudi Arabia in a visit to the country.
The number of dead in the St. Petersburg metro bombing rises to 14 as police identify a suspect.
First image of Croydon attack victim Rebecca Ahmed is released and 6 people are charged in connection with the assault.
The National Trust reinstates Easter after the PM called the egg cup round ridiculous. At least 58 people, including a number of children, are thought to have died in a suspected gas attack in Syria's Idlib province.
Photos and videos have emerged showing people choking and fainting after the attack.
Last week, the Syrian government said claims it was using chemical weapons were devoid of truth. It's understood the rebel-held Syrian town of Khan Sheikhoun was the target. Let's talk about diplomats here. It's a government rifle. So what more do we know of this story?
Well, we're used to hearing and seeing horrendous stories out of Syria, but even by terrible standards, this is particularly serious and appalling. It is one of, if not the worst, gas attacks, it seems, of the entire Syrian civil war. So 58 dead, an estimated 160 injured, according to observers, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, that has catalogued reliably casualties in the Syrian civil war since it began. And it does seem to be either an artillery shell or a number of shells or an airstrike that has caused terrible devastation in this town. So if you look at the pictures, a lot of the pictures we're not able to show you, but the pictures we can show you are of children here who are being revived, or doctors are hoping to revive, having inhaled, it seems, chlorine gas. What chlorine gas does is it gets into your lungs, it combines with the water in your lungs and the membranes of your lungs, and it turns that water into acid. So it's a very painful experience to go through in a very painful way, a terrible way to die if you don't survive. These children are lying on these hospital beds, doctors trying to revive them, getting oxygen into their lungs, trying to keep them breathing as that chemical reaction is underway in their lungs. Other pictures we've seen are of adult civilians as well. And here the white helmets, emergency workers, volunteers are on the scene trying to spray the chlorine gas or whatever this chemical weapon is off the bodies of these children. Other pictures we can't show you are of bodies, a lot of bodies lying in the streets in the same place. Other people undergoing spasms, trying to get air into their lungs, not being attended to by the emergency workers who believe that they beyond hope, and others receiving treatment. So it's a horrendous scene, and I think that death toll again is only likely to increase because so many are very seriously injured.
And it's disturbing, I mean, horrific as these images are from the hospital. I'm getting these reports from AFP that the hospital itself has been bombed.
That's right, yes. So the latest reports are at least one of the hospitals, I'm not sure if it's the hospital in York, which is on here. The injured were taken to a number of medical facilities and clinics. And according to AFP, at least one of these was struck by a rocket, some kind of incoming activity. That is in line with what we know. That's what the Syrians and the Russians have been doing, and they left those deliberately targeting medical facilities. We can't confirm that, we can't say exactly who's responsible for that attack, but it's a horrendous compounding of the tragedy and disaster that's befallen people in this town in the wake of what is almost certainly one of, if not the worst, weapons attacks in Syria. Almost certainly the hands of a regime that, as we say, has been maintaining it doesn't do this anymore, despite mounting evidence, continuous evidence that it has been using chemical weapons against its own people.
Last week, May campaigned at the UK's links with Saudi Arabia paying a visit to the country as part of a trade mission to the Middle East.
Well, the Prime Minister told Sky she had no difficulty in raising allegations of human rights violations with the government there, but she did want to maintain good trading relationships post-Brexit. She was talking to our political editor, Faisal Islam.
We have no difficulty in raising hard issues with those that we meet with, both here in Saudi Arabia or elsewhere around the world. What matters is that we have the relationship of engagement that enables us to do that. But we will also be talking about the very important relationship that the UK has with Saudi Arabia, an important relationship, yes, in terms of trade, but also in terms of security. Our cooperation, with Saudi's cooperation with us, has helped to save lives in the UK.
Is that part of developing any more foreign threat to people and relating it to Brexit? Are we downplaying human rights concerns, your visits to Saudi Arabia, to Turkey? Where's the strong British tradition of standing up for human rights?
The strong British tradition of standing up for human rights is there. The strong British tradition of standing up for British national interest is there. I want to see the United Kingdom as a truly global Britain. Outward-looking, around the world, trading around the world. Yes, a good, continuing deep partnership with the European Union, but also trading and working with others around the whole of the globe. That's what we will be doing in the future. That's what I'm working on. Yes, it's about trade. That's about jobs back home in the United Kingdom. But it's also about our security. Security for the UK and us working with others to maintain security around the world.
Let's be to our political correspondent now, Catherine, who's in Westminster for our President Darren. The Prime Minister faces a lot of pressure from human rights campaign groups asking the people how to make sure she questions and speaks to Saudi Arabia about their human rights track record, and also pressure from the Brexit community, making sure that she secures a better trade and investment deal. There's a bit of a balancing act ahead of her.
Yeah, the tightrope that Theresa May is having to walk with this trip to Saudi Arabia. Not surprisingly, of course, given the human rights record of the country, given the laws that it enforces, given the fact that Theresa May is a female Prime Minister, there are people who want to see Theresa May take the top line in Saudi Arabia. This is a country that was involved in a very controversial war in Yemen, and the Prime Minister is making sure that she will raise some of those issues on her trip. She's currently on a plane en route there at the moment. But ultimately, of course, I think it's also seen through the Brexit prism element, and that to a large degree is trade. And Saudi Arabia is at the pivot of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is an organisation the European Union has been trying to organise a trade deal with for the last 10 years or so, unsuccessfully. Britain now sees an opportunity, given the fact that we're able to sign our own trade deals. Now, at the moment, trade with Saudi Arabia is only, what, £30 billion a year. Small in comparison to a trade with the rest of Europe, but clearly Theresa May's task is to try and potentially increase our trading relationship with Saudi Arabia, to maybe make up for the loss that we may well see with these single market. Also, as we said in that interview, Theresa May was asked about this report today, talking about Brexit from the committee of Parliament headed by David Benn, the Brexit committee essentially, in which they concluded that there was not enough work to be done to find out what no deal would look like if Britain was to fall out of the European Union. It's kind of peaceable coming from Theresa May, but maybe a better than a bad deal. But they said that's not substantiated. We've no idea what we're doing, but like it may not be bad for the British economy. Not everyone, it must be said, on the agreed. 6 members of the committee, particularly the Brexiteers, said it was too gloomy and refused to sign it. The government's response to what Theresa May had to say to Faisal was essentially that the government will prepare for all scenarios, that it was the responsibility of government to accept that the possibility of the deal, though she repeatedly said that was.
Okay, Dan, thanks so much.
Russian special services have released a photo of the suspect they believe is behind the suicide bomb which killed 14 people on the St. Petersburg metro yesterday. Officials in Kyrgyzstan have named the bomber as Akhmedion Jalilov, who is in his early 20s and has Russian citizenship.
Well, the explosion happened at around 2:20 yesterday afternoon between two underground stations on a train leaving the Technological Institute station and heading towards Tanaya Poshad. Russia's anti-terror agency says another bomb was made to save a nearby Poshad radio station. Our Russia correspondent John Sparks reports on St. Petersburg.
Russian officials were quick to call this deadly explosion on an underground train in St. Petersburg a terrorist act. And the hunt is now on for those responsible. Multiple sources here saying a suspect from Central Asia was involved. A man who may have blown himself up in a suicide strike.
They were carrying out victims. One person has severed limbs. It's all very difficult.
It was horrible. When I came outside, there was blood everywhere. I saw one woman who had blood all over her face and on her nose.
The authorities shut down the metro network in St. Petersburg. Later, they found a larger explosive device disguised as a fire extinguisher in another metro station. Only one bomb was detonated here in St. Petersburg, but security sources are saying that both devices were strikingly similar in the way they were constructed, in the way they were put together. And that suggests that considerable time, effort, and organization was spent in carrying out this attack. Terrorist attacks on Russian soil have been relatively rare of late. 4 years ago, 2 suicide bombers killed 34 people in attacks in the Russian city of Volgograd. In 2011, more than 30 died in an attack at a Moscow airport. As the police and security services begin to investigate this latest incident, the people of St. Petersburg start to count the cost. People like President Putin. The attack, a reminder to him and others that Russia is vulnerable too.
The National Trust in Cadbury's have been accused of airbrushing fakes from an Easter egg hunt. The annual event, previously billed as the Easter Egg Trail, has been rebranded on the National Trust website as the Cadbury Egg Hunt. Bishop York this weekend said it was tantamount to spitting on the grave of Cadbury, and the Prime Minister has called it absolute ridiculous. The National Trust has since updated its website to say join the Cadbury Egg Hunts this Easter, and the way it's been calling all of this. So a sort of backtrack on this. What did you think of? Yes, so this morning the words "It's Easter" were not on that website. In the past couple of hours, the Prime Minister has commented on this story, and now we see the words "It's Easter" have popped up on the National Trust website. So Easter egg hunt. It's not an Easter egg hunt officially, but it's a long-standing tradition between National Trust and the chocolate maker Cadbury's. And wading into the right there, not only do we have the Prime Minister commenting, but also the Archbishop of York, Dr. John Sentinel. He has been very strong in his comments, and he says that quite simply the company whose founder was a devout Christian, a Quaker, John Cadbury in 1824, founded that company, and Dr. Sentinel said that their actions in the past couple of days are tantamount to spitting on his grave. That's what the Archbishop of York has said. We can take a look at the statement now we've had through from the National Trust. They say it's nonsense to suggest the National Trust is downplaying the significance of Easter. Nothing could be further from the truth. A casual glance at our website will see dozens of references to Easter throughout. As part of its wider marketing activity of Easter, Cadbury's will always lead on the branding and wording for its campaigns. And just look at what the Prime Minister has actually called out political editor Faisal Islam this morning. She says, "I'm not just a victim's daughter, I'm a member of the National Trust as well. I think the stance they have taken is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what they are thinking about, frankly." that's from the Prime Minister in the past couple of hours as well. So if I were being cynical, it's worth pointing out that they're getting an awful lot more coverage of the Easter egg hunt this year than the previous years. Okay. Thank you.
This afternoon, police have released a picture of the teenage asylum seeker attacked in Sweden. Reka Ahmed was left with a fractured skull and blood clots in his brain, but is said to be starting to make a recovery in hospital. 13 people, including a 15-year-old boy, have been charged over suspected police attack.
Roman Polanski has failed to bring an end to his long-running child sex abuse case. The Australian director of Memphis says nearly 40 years ago, after admitting having sex with a 13-year-old girl living in France, he'd been seeking assurances that if he returned, he would not face prison. But the judge was rejected the motion by his lawyers, saying he should not get special treatment as a celebrity.
Speaking of celebrities, Harrison Ford will keep his pilot's license and won't face a fine after he flew his private plane over an American Airlines jet and mistakenly landed on a taxiway in California. The Federal Aviation Administration has closed an investigation into the accident near miss in February, praising his cooperation and saying he's agreed to undergo permanent counselling.
The Mayor of London said he now plans to introduce the world's first ultra-low emission zone in London to tackle pollution. He's already announced plans for a £10 toxicity charge, which will come into force in October. That will be payable on top of the congestion charge that will affect some of the oldest and most polluted diesel cars.
Here in London, over 9,000 people died prematurely because of poor quality air. Across the country, by the way, it's more than 40,000 premature deaths. There are children in parts of London whose lungs are defective. There are more than 430 schools in areas where the air is illegal. And I'm going to stand by while that carries on. From April 2019, we hope to have the world's first ultra-low emission zone. So, unless your vehicle abides by strict emission standards, if you're coming to central London, you'll pay a higher charge.
Now, could this save millions of lives? Scientists in Manchester discovered a way to sieve seawater and turn it into drinking water. Using a membrane made of graphene, researchers were able to remove salts from the water and make it safe to drink. The technology offers the potential for millions of people in developing worlds to get access to drinking water.
Now, the Chancellor is in India today, leading a UK trade mission to boost business ties after Brexit. In a press conference jointly held with the Indian Finance Minister, Philip Hammond praised the country's shared values and said they'll build on historical ties. This is a mature relationship between equals, the largest democracy in the world and the oldest democracy in the world. Coming back together to look at building a new relationship as India's economy opens up, as the UK averts its gaze from Europe more towards the wider world, and both of us seeing opportunities that of course are based on some of our common heritage. We share a legal system, we share a language of business, which gives us huge advantages in trying to build trade and investment links between our countries. These are things that we can and we will build upon.
Do Indians share the Chancellor's enthusiasm for journalists and all from many of those? Good to see you, as always. Look, I mean, this is such a massive economy. It's obviously going to be very important to Britain. Is a child offensive like this going to work?
I'm afraid not. When Theresa May went, she received actually less publicity than a few weeks later when Alan Shearer went. Yes, Manchester United versus Liverpool is very big. It is shocked our Premier League. The problem with the trade is that the Indians, for instance, what do they want? They want more access to their students to come here and stay on after 2 years. It's very interesting. The numbers of Indian students here declined from 40,000 in 2010 to less than 16,000 now. Whereas Germany, to give India historic ties, which Chancellor was referring to there, the numbers have doubled. In fact, as many Indian students in Germany. And the reason for that is Theresa May, the Home Secretary, she cut the 2-year extension they could stay. And the reason the Indians like that is they borrow a lot of money from India and they want to work for 2 years to pay back. And this is how the Indians
important. But, I mean, you want to build up personal relationships. And the thing with students and things like that is that they are sort of, if you like, long-term relationships. You studied in Britain, then you're likely to trade with Britain. And you know, we are looking at post-Brexit, not 1 or 2 years. We're looking at a very medium-term horizon. And this is where I think, unless the British government is prepared on the immigration front to be more reasonable to the Indians will not be that keen to do trade. And other countries, other European countries, like Germany, like France, have been very active in the Indian market.
But there's no real benefit to India, is there, in terms of cutting the trade or reducing the trade that they have with Britain once we're out of the EU?
Oh no, absolutely not. But the Indians, what we want is enthusiasm, right? What we are saying, and what the Chancellor is saying, once Britain goes alone, we can build up a relationship with all the old countries, all the have tried. The question is, will India respond by being more responsive to them? That's what we want. And that is the problem. They won't cut much, no, but they are not going to respond that enthusiastically until the British own a very enormous British stockpile, which the British ought to exploit, which they don't exploit in India, as well as they could.
Such as?
Well, on sport, on culture, on literature, and so on. And the British don't, it needs to be not just trade, it needs to be part of an entire package. And there is a lot of goodwill for Britain and India, but it needs to be exploited properly. And at the moment, what we do is, we do it rather than haphazard and in a very curious way.
I mean, is there a set, I'm not reluctant to say it in a way, but the idea that we almost fall back to the empire and think that empire attitude, they will want to work with it.
Well, that's the problem. The Indians don't see the empire in that matter of great pride. So many of them are a matter of shame. So, I mean, what do you then have, if you like, with Australia and New Zealand have family ties, and lots of people who have connections. We don't have that in India. And therefore we have to build new ties. And in a way, curiously as it may sound, David Cameron did it some years ago with a success. He played cricket, he also ate street food like Rick Stein. We need people who can go out there and, if you like, meet Indians and say, yes, we quite like you.
Are we going to get this democracy playing hardball then?
I think yes. I think we will. And I think the Indians at the moment will say, give us something in return, and then we will come back and show you enthusiasm.
So, as always, thank you.
Okay, let's talk coming up after the break, and let's find out what it's going on.
It's wet weather gear at the ready. The Masters in Augusta, where Arsenal manager Arsene Wenger thought the Premier League title race is far from over.
In 2017, Sky News was Brexit inspected.
The headlines tell you one thing, but we go deeper, getting on top of the economic effects and assessing the upshot for the market.
Both globally and here at home.
We'll have the latest on all the negotiations here in Brussels and analyse the wider impact on UK politics.
Brexit, from every angle, on Sky News.
Ladies and gentlemen, BT's 14-day unmissable sale is now on. Get fibre optic and limited infinity and unlimited UK weekend calls with an unmissable deal on BT TV and save £150 over 12 months. Plus, get £125 in card if you sign up online. But hurry, BT's 14-day unmissable sale must end on the 10th of April. Join today. Call 0800 005 800 or visit bt.com/sale.
Experience BASF when you create, play, connect, share, protect, nourish, and learn. Because although you might not notice us,
Our solutions are helping you to make the most of your everyday life. That's why at BASF we create chemistry.
Have you ever looked for a hotel online? Did you notice that there are so many different prices out there for the exact same room? Trivago searches hundreds of websites at the same time and shows you the most popular hotels. You can then easily compare all the hotel rooms that meet your search criteria and find the room that is ideal for you. Remember, Trivago shows you all the different prices for the exact same room. And that's how you can be sure that you find your ideal hotel for the best price. Hotel Trivago.
I just want to give some breaking news that we're getting following that what seems to be a chemical weapons attack in Syria. The Idlib province looked very bad on that, possibly touring looking at these just a few images we can show. A lot of children very badly injured and dead in all of this. France is now calling for an emergency UN Security Council meeting following this attack. Bashar al-Assad said Syria isn't using chemical weapons. This would seem to cry very much in the face of that. There's an awful lot of concern, as you can imagine. We'll bring you an update on that a little bit later on.
Thanks, Mark, this week. Let's be up to date on that and the rest of the sport.
What's the problem? Not exactly Niagara Falls, is it?
Arsene Wenger said we'll know soon if he plans to remain Arsenal manager. For now, he's concentrating on making sure Arsenal finish in the Premier League's top four. As far as finishing top, he feels lead with Chelsea are the guarantee for title.
It depends on City tomorrow night with Chelsea, of course, and Chelsea's still in a very comfortable position. It's still possible that the title race is not happening.
Well, Wenger's opposite number tomorrow night has his own concerns. On Sunday, the West Ham board gave Slaven Bilic a vote of confidence, but he says he's not worried about his position.
I'm talking about this for my job and on my next game, and on the next game, and that's the only way that you should act and that you should speak.
There's the matches tonight. Manchester United take on Everton at Old Trafford. Leicester manager Craig Shakespeare will be aiming to win its fifth league game in a row since taking over from Claudio Ranieri and from Sunderland.
I know I have to keep my feet firm on the ground because there's just very fine margins in football and along the way, maybe I'm thinking of the West Ham game, we actually rather have up at times, but you have to be deep and maybe I'm the lucky one.
Rugby ex-staff coach Matt Ford is actually on after 6 months in charge. He'll be replaced by former Leicester director of rugby and Geelong's current Forwards coach Richard Cockrell. Ford leads the 3-time European champions after being knocked out of the Champions Cup by Plymouth on Saturday. Now we're exactly 1 year away from the start of the 2018 Commonwealth Games in Australia. Team England has announced that table tennis player Paul Wilson and Liam Pitchford are the first athletes to qualify. And will be sending their biggest ever squads to games in hopes of success are high.
I never quite get the rules and set on for England, and I'm struck as an athlete. I would always sort of look for never quite get forward. Not helpful are they for me and for the people who are going to be supporting to talk about them because I have my own never targets. I wanted to get on that page and that certainly was my goal. And if each one of our team members is looking at it and working out how they can get their best performance of us.
We're forecast today at Augusta, expecting better as the world's top golfers prepare for the Masters. The first day of practice was interrupted by a storm in the morning. In the afternoon, the course was evacuated because of a tornado warning. So, by the way, which you can find out on Sky Sports, is the only place to see all 4 days of the Masters live. With more now on Sky Sports News HQ, and we're back in an hour.
Or you could just hand it to me.
Let's take a look at how the weather's looking.
Gentle winds call you, and air of hospitality grows through Bali.
The has been quite dull this morning and afternoon, could stay that way. The southeastern half of England will stay rather dull and damp for the first part of the afternoon. But northern Scotland will see a massive showers running in on gale force winds. Now, most other places will be dry, with at least some sunny spells, best over central Britain. Southern Britain, though, and the south of Ireland will be dry tonight after an evening of rain, which clears the south east. While northern Britain, Northern Ireland, and the Northern Ireland will see some showery outbreaks. Now, tomorrow will be a fairly cloudy day with a little patchy rain in the north and west.
The weather is sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Stay with us here on Sky News. Coming up more on the Chancellor in India drumming up business for potent Brexit.
Brexit, Brexit, Brexit. I know what the people in here say about it. It's time to get out of Westminster. I'll be on the road all over the country finding out what Brexit means.
My dad can open doors just by standing in front of them. He can even move heavy things without touching them. I swear.
Surprising features, amazing quality, and an unbelievable 7-year warranty. It's time for a closer look at the Kia Sportage.
Have you been left your pocket from your smartphone?
Felix knows exactly what he's doing with the smartphone.
And we won't.
I'm going to I don't know what apps are.
No idea how to do video calling.
I don't know what thinking means. What is roaming data?
I'm worried about security.
I don't know what the cloud is.
It's very difficult to take part.
Don't get left behind. It is easy to follow which smartphone you have. Our Which experts cover important things from setting up your phone to keeping your phone secure, taking and sharing photos, making video calls, downloading essential apps, and the handy Jargon cluster.
I found out how to do the video call.
It'd be nice to know that there is a guide that I can include mum and dad to.
I think it will replace you. I can download apps.
Call 0800 112 4444 for your free copy.
And the Spanish Street wonderful place, a witch guide. Trustworthy.
It's independent. What's not to know?
Don't get left behind. Get your free Which guide. Call 0800 112 4444.
It shows you how you can get the most out of your smartphone. So thank you, Rich.
Can I trust you? Can I trust you? You know what we have to do.
This is not easy. You need people who believe in what we believe.
Well, the speech at the empty retro, they do nothing. They do nothing. We need to do something.
Introducing the Sky Kids app, available for Sky TV customers at no extra cost. Sky, believe in better.
They'll never be able to do the small man in the box.
I think the other smaller box is brilliant. It is also the apotheosis of your career.
What is Sky News, the headlines this afternoon? At least 58 people, including a number of children, are believed to have died in a suspected gas attack with serious injuries from it.
The man suspected of killing 14 people by bombing a Petersburg train has been identified by intelligence agencies as Akmazon Janibab, a native of Kyrgyzstan.
And Theresa May has told Sky News she will have no difficulty in raising allegations of human rights violations when visiting Saudi Arabia later.
Now, what does Easter mean to you? A chance to have a little bit too much chocolate, or perhaps just an ice cream or something?
Well, the important time to attend church and potentially become the member of the crucifixion and the reaction of Christ. And of course, it can be all of those things, but the National Trust is facing criticism today for airbrushing faith from an Easter egg hunt organised by Cadbury.
The admission of the word Easter from the event public criticism from the Archbishop of York, right through Prime Minister. That's as of Christian today. Good to see as we was. I mean, we can't be surprised, can we, that there is heavy commercialisation and the very existence of chocolate eggs is that in itself.
Part and parcel with the growing secularisation of the country. And one can't help feel that there is an attempt to kind of slightly airbrush anything explicitly Christian from events where people, I suppose understandably, want to have broader appeal to just the Christian market. So, although Easter was removed from the logo of this event, run by National Trust and Cadbury's, they have put it on Easter on their website. Easter doesn't appear on their website, and that's probably the Daily Mirror to call it fake news.
Oh.
but there is a sense that the Prime Minister was not speaking for no reason. There is a sense in which there was an attempt to minimise the fact that it is an explicitly Christian festival. So it's egg hunt rather than Easter egg hunt.
And it's a very small thing, and part of me is surprised that it's caused such outrage in a way. I mean, I can understand it, but does it really matter in this sort of that sort of event?
Well, symbols have great significance, and Easter is a hugely important event in terms of this country's whole history and tradition. And you have to ask yourself, what's next? You know, on the 25th of December, we'll just celebrate Day. You know, will Father come down the chimney? You know, how much is it becoming politically incorrect to simply talk about Christmas and Easter?
Well, of course, we do get that in the States, don't we? It's the holidays.
Happy holidays, but that's of course coming under much criticism also from people objecting to that trend. And there is a fight back against that trend from the churches. And I think the churches have to be a little bit careful they don't go too far fighting back and make themselves seem, you know, to be overreacting to something when there are really hugely important issues in the world going on at the same time. So nevertheless, it is important, and these symbols have huge importance to vast numbers of people. And it does feel, I think people do feel that their faith, or that the symbols of their faith are being threatened when institutions like Cadbury's and like National Trust appear to view with this secularisation.
And how did you feel when you heard news that Easter had been removed by the National Trust? Was it a big deal for you? Were you quite upset by it?
Oh, it's annoying actually. I feel annoyed because it's like, why try to deny this? What's the point of doing this? Easter egg hunts, children love them, adults love them. They've been going on for years and years and years, and everyone knows that the egg is a symbol of renewal and fertility as well as a resurrection, and that the egg is a symbol of this time of year goes that way before the Christian tradition. But nevertheless, the Easter egg and Easter Day is how we refer to this festival and the events surrounding it at the moment. So why take it away? What's the point of doing that? It's like trying to appease or appeal to an element of compartmentalism that actually doesn't exist. And if you talk to other faith communities, they don't want to see churches downplay their presence or their significance. Because faith communities want all faiths to be represented. And it's important that there is freedom of faith and freedom of religion. Obviously, this is not a direct attack on those things. But it is part of a trend towards secularisation that I think the churches are right to resist if maybe they shouldn't overreact to it.
Okay. So, very good to get your thoughts this afternoon. Thank you. Tell us what you think. Obviously, tweeting. I mean, Kelly is tweeting saying call to support Easter is being airbrushed out of our society because of political correctness. I don't like that. No. Ask guys
Now, Theresa May has denied turning a blind eye to human rights abuses in order to sign trade deals. The Prime Minister's due in Saudi Arabia later as part of her Middle East trade mission.
She's defended her dealings with the kingdom and says she'll bring up the issue of Yemen, where the Saudi military is engaged in a long-running campaign. She was talking to our political editor, Alison Islam.
So when you're just about to go to meet some child refugees in a school, do you feel vindicated by an approach that says that those refugees should stay here in the region when some are criticising back home for not staying or should come to that? Well, I think it's very important, as the UK government has done since the beginning of the Syrian crisis, that we do predominantly provide aid in the region so we can support people so they're close to home. So when we do see a peaceful solution to conflict in Syria and people are able to return home, they're able to do that. But while they are refugees in countries like Jordan, which I'll be visiting some refugees today, we actually help provide education and training so they have the skills they need when they finally return home.
So kids to stay here.
I think it's important because, of course, we're taking refugee children into the United Kingdom, but the view we took was that it's important to ensure that those who bring to the United Kingdom go to the most vulnerable, who particularly require the help and support that we can give in the UK. But for the majority, we have helped far more refugees by the aid we're pushing into the region. Our total aid as a result of the Syrian crisis is £2.3 billion. We've been the second biggest bilateral donor overall. That means we have been providing food, water, medical supplies, and yes, education and training to young people, to refugees, to help them with their futures.
On Saudi Arabia, isn't it just the reality that you are not going to raise with King Salman the issue of jail dissidents, the issue of the use by the Saudis of cluster bombs made in Britain against Yemen?
We have no difficulty in raising hard issues with those that we live with, that be it in Saudi Arabia or elsewhere around the world. What matters is that we have the relationship engagement that enables us to do that. But we will also be talking about the very important relationship the UK has with Saudi Arabia, an important relationship, yes, in terms of trade, but also in terms of security. Our cooperation, Saudi's cooperation with us, has helped to save lives in the UK.
Is that part of developing any more foreign trips? People are relating it to Brexit. Are we downplaying human rights concerns? Your visits to Saudi Arabia, to Turkey? Where's the strong British tradition of standing up for human rights?
The strong British tradition of standing up for human rights is there. The strong British tradition of standing up for British national interest is there. I want to see the United Kingdom as a truly global group. Outward looking, around the world, trading around the world. Yes, a good, continuing deep partnership with the European Union, but also trading and working with others around the whole of the globe. That's what we will be doing in the future. That's what I'm working on. Yes, it's about trade. That's about jobs back home in the United Kingdom. But it's also about our security. Security for the UK and us working with others to maintain security around the world.
So, you mentioned our phrase truly global nation in the future, but we're standing here in Jordan. Currently, we have a free trade arrangement with Jordan through the EU. I mean, the risk is we lose that. So it's not about being more global. How do we protect what we've got already in terms of how global we are?
It will be possible for us to continue trade relations with countries where we previously had the EU, once we're outside the European Union. But it also means that we can negotiate our own free trade arrangements with various parts of the world. I think that's going to be important to us. We want to have a deep and special partnership continuing with the European Union. But yes, we want to build our relationships with old friends and new allies alike around the world.
In terms of your strategic objectives, before we got to this point, we're now doing against Article 50. You want to pre-negotiate them, you didn't get them. You wanted parallel negotiations on the exit deal and Article 50. They said no. You talked about no deal. It doesn't look like anybody believes that threat. Have your key strategic aims not been hit and consider Article 50?
No, you're quite right. I mean, first of all, let's look at the whole question of the where we end up at the end of this negotiation. Will we have looked at both withdrawal and the future relationship? That's what's important. That's what I'm asking for, and that's what I believe increasingly we will see. We will see from the European Union. Various people have commented that they think we should get on to looking at that future relationship soon, and we will do that. What's important is that when we leave the EU, people know what the future relationship is. It's common sense, it's pragmatic for people, it's pragmatic for business. well, because a great deal being good deal for us, it will be a good deal for the rest of the European Union. On the security issue, it's a very practical reason for raising it in the letter. We're currently a member of certain programs, certain systems around Europe that help us to cooperate on exchanging information about terrorists, but also about criminals. Not illegally do our membership of those systems lapses. So it's right that part of the negotiations will be talking to the European Union about how we can continue with those arrangements. It's in our interest, it's also in theirs.
If you're confident that no deal can be better than a bad deal, why not publish some evidence, independent evidence, to prove that, as the committee suggested today?
Well, I'm very clear that we will be working to get the best possible deal for the UK. As I said in the Article 50 letter, I set out with what would be a no-deal situation, but I also said I don't think that's in anybody's interest. We will be working to get the best possible deal in the British national interest. I believe that deal will be good for the European Union as well. I believe both sides will be working to ensure we have a good, positive, deep and special partnership going into the future.
Can you clarify that you accept what the European Council suggested, which is that the final deal will be done as a third country status under a unanimous vote with everyone having a veto?
There's obviously a legal situation in terms of how the European Union conduct trade negotiations. I'm clear that by the point at which we leave the European Union, it's right that everybody should know what the future arrangement, the future relationship, that future partnership between us and the European Union will be. That's the sensible thing. It's a pragmatic way to look at this, and I believe that's what we'll do.
And you still think that can be done within 2 years?
Yes.
Okay, just lastly, you admit that now this judgment, that people made a judgment, but your decisions on leaving the single market and on leaving the customs union, this is now on you. It's your judgment, and if it goes wrong, it's the responsibility of Prime Minister May.
The British people chose to leave the European Union. I set out very clearly, the European Union has made clear that the membership of the single market effectively means membership of the European Union. People have decided not to be members of the European Union, so our relationship with the single market will be a different one in future. But that doesn't mean it can't be a really good trade relationship that will enable our firms to have free access to the single market and continue to trade in ways that they have done in the past.
Let's talk to Faisal Al-Sami, the Prime Minister, and joins us from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, where they've just landed, where there's no underestimating, despite her determination, what a tough job this is going to be to actually make the points that people here want her to make in terms of human rights.
Yeah, that is a tough one with Saudi Arabia, because she's trying to achieve multiple objectives in talks with the Saudi leaders. She just landed at Riyadh Air Base, was met by the Crown Prince, and is now gone into talks with the leadership of Saudi Arabia. And there's many different objectives she's trying to seek there, in keeping with a long relationship between the United Kingdom and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. She's trying to prolong and enhance security cooperation in this difficult world, this difficult region. She says that Saudi intelligence cooperation has saved hundreds of lives in the United Kingdom. There's also this issue of trade after Brexit. There is an opportunity to forge a trade deal, a free trade arrangement with the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is a kind of like embryonic EU, that's a common market, anchored by Saudi Arabia. They've been trying to do a deal with the EU, haven't gone too far for a decade, and now the United Kingdom wants to step in. But there's always issues over Brexit.
Mom? Okay. La 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 la. Mummy.